Pressure. What's pressure? It's a force per square inch, right? It's basically it's the average push force that you have. Okay. Normal is 120/80. What is atmospheric pressure?
760.
760. God, darn, that's a big number. And we know through laws of mass action that things go from higher concentration to lesser concentration, right? So if it's 760 out here, and 120/80 is not even like your veins, that's slowly. 120/80 is like where the pressure is highest, right, in your arteries. Like in your veins, like if I prick my finger, like that's like 40 millimeters of mercury. That's not a lot of pressure. So if it's 760 out here and 40 here, why not when I prick my finger, why don't I implode? Why does blood leak out and not air come in? No one thinks of these things? I'm kidding. It's a cool question, right? And there's an answer to it, and eventually it's going to lead into my lecture today with muscles. And the reason is because 760 is everywhere. It's everything. 120/80 is on top of 760. In other words, 760 is a baseline. It's a relative zero. And our pressure in our body is on top of it. So technically, our blood pressure in our arteries, with our heart and our arteries as we measure it, is technically 880, right? In other words, that's what it is. But because everything is 760, we subtract that and we just give the leftovers, is what I'm trying to say. 120/80, 40, all that stuff is leftover on top of the 760. So the analogy of that applies to muscles in that our muscles always pull, and there's always physiological work going into it. So in other words, if you remember from basic physics, for there to be work, there has to be motion, right? There has to be movement. There has to be distance for work. If you push on a car, it doesn't move, you didn't do any work on the car. That kind of gets confusing when we're talking about doing isometrics, because if you're just holding a position, there's no movement going on, but after a while, you sure feel like your muscles are doing something. And the reason you feel like you're doing something is because they are doing something. It's not necessarily the mechanical work, it's the physiological work. In other words, inside the muscle, there's a lot of movement happening. There's a lot of movement. There's a lot of things going on inside there physiologically. So when I talk about work, that's the kind of work I'm talking about. The physiological work that will manifest itself into mechanical work. But when you think about someone going to work, they're going to do a job. I came to work today at 5:50 in the morning to do a job. You came to work today to do a job. After you leave, you may go to work to do a job. Muscles go to work to do jobs. And in this case, my shoulder muscles might be doing a job preventing my arm from falling down. That's a job. An elevator cable pulling up while the elevator is stationary, allowing people to get off, letting people get on, that cable is doing a job, even though there's no motion going on. It's doing a job, preventing you from falling down. Okay? So our muscles have a baseline. We call it resting tone. But the way I'd like for you to look at it is physiological baseline, resting work. In other words, you don't get tired at rest. You can maintain, you can watch TV all day, you can sleep all day. There's still work being done in your body. The muscles never turn off. It's a physiological baseline. That's what we call rest. resting tone. Rest doesn't mean you shut off. There is still physiology happening there. There's still this going on with the actin and myosin. However, it's something you can maintain all day and not get tired of. In other words, think of it like this. If a bricklayer, hardcore, a job I could never do because I'm not that tough, but a bricklayer goes to work and lays bricks all day. When he goes home, he rests, but his body is still metabolizing, his body's still working, muscles still pulling. So my point is that that same metabolism level was happening while he was at work, laying bricks. It's just laying the bricks was on top of what that baseline was. Like the blood pressure. So when I say that muscles are working, the implication is above resting tone, above resting levels. They're doing a job above what they normally do at rest. The amount of energy, the amount of excitation, contraction, coupling, all that happens when you sleep in. When I'm talking about muscles doing a job, it means above that level of innervation, above rest. When I talk about muscles contracting, whether it's isometrically, concentrically, eccentrically, I'm going to go into all these, it's above what's happening at rest. I'll give you an example. I'll try to give you some examples. If you're in the therapy clinic or the athletic training room and you're helping someone with their motion and you tell them, relax, relax, just let me have your shoulder, let me have your shoulder. Doing some passive motion stuff. As you move their arm, let's pretend I'm laying down and I'm trying to relax. As they move my arm up and down, they're shortening and lengthening of the muscles. But that doesn't mean those muscles were undergoing concentric and eccentric work. That doesn't mean those muscles were concentrically or eccentrically contracting. If they're at rest, they're not doing a job above resting tone. It's only when you make the phone call to these muscles to do something above rest that we consider them contracting or working. It's above resting tone. That's important. So muscles are always pulling. Technically, muscles are always working. Muscles are always trying to shorten. But we are not going to consider them contracting or working until we innervate them above what they could do all day at rest. Is that clear? Clear as mud? Okay. So, let's get this biomechanics mumbo jumbo out of the way. And let's get into contraction types. Now, before I get into these three, which I'm sure you've been introduced before, my job is to develop that understanding and take it to a new level of understanding, to really understand what it means. Let's first talk about some things that are not contraction types. Plyometrics is not a contraction type. It's a contraction sequence, but your muscle can't win, lose, or draw and play in a double header and I lose the first game and then I win the second game. That's kind of how plyometrics is. It's, in other words, each game is an outcome, win, lose, or draw. But if I play a double header, 2 games back to back, and I lose the first one and I win the second one, that sequence we can term plyometrics. Another term that's not a contraction type is isotonic and isokinetic. That's not a contraction type. It's kind of parameters that we can set on the muscles to do certain things. I can set it where the speed of the motion is going to be fixed and the amount of force can be variable. You need expensive equipment to be able to adapt. That's like if you're doing manual muscle resistance is isokinetic, because you can vary how much you push in order to try to get a constant range of motion there. So instead of you doing it, we just have like a $35,000 to $50,000 machine that does it for you. But that's not a type of contraction. Again, it's a type of parameters for the contractions. The contractions still come down to 3 options. Everything that pulls has 3 options when working normally. Rupture is not really, it's an option, but it's not a normal functioning option. Reaching yield point is not normal. Win, lose, or draw. I make a phone call to that muscle above resting tone, basically saying, come to work, start laying bricks, get up and move. Pull more than you do at rest. One of 3 things can happen. I can not change the length of the rope or the muscle. I can shorten the length of the rope or the muscle. Or, here's the trick, guys, write this down, you will not regret it. A rope or muscle can be lengthened. I know that's semantical, but it's extremely important. No muscle lengthens itself. Just like no rubber band lengthens itself. Just like no TheraBand ever lengthens itself. If you have a TheraBand in the clinic that lengthens itself, it is possessed. Muscles cannot lengthen themselves. They can be lengthened, but they cannot lengthen themselves. I'll give you some examples. Okay? Now, in all 3 cases, just like I mentioned on Wednesday, what do they all have in common? Things that pull, try to shorten. They try. Now, you can try in different levels of effort. We can barely try. We can a lot of try. When someone ruptures a muscle or ruptures a tendon, it shortens. It's always pulled. All 3 cases, you're trying to shorten. What separates the different types of contractions above resting tone is what happens when you're trying. Do you have no change in the length of the 2 ends that you're pulling from while you're trying to shorten? And that's what isometric lift means. It's isometric work. Now let's think about the kind of job isometrics would do. Prevention of motion. Sometimes you gotta know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, know when to run. Sometimes your muscles work to prevent unwanted motions from happening. You guys do this every morning. Your muscles in the back of your head, your cervical extensors that pull in the direction of cervical extension, pull when your head is erect because you have more mass on this end of the teeter-totter. Your teeter-totter on your head is like this. Here's all the mass in the front of your head, and here's the back of your head. And gravity wants to move your teeter-totter like this. So the back muscles pull like this to keep your head from flexing forward. That's why a lot of times at work and stuff, oh man, back of my head, tension, headache. Yeah, they've been doing a job all day. Isometrics. Preventing motion. Yoga, there's a lot of isometrics in there, right? Holding poses, where if you turned off all the muscles, something would flop down or move or you'd fall. It's about working for a purpose to prevent unwanted motions from happening. That's working. That's doing a job. You don't have to see motion to do a job. Okay? So isometrics happen all the time in activities of daily living, in exercise regimes, and again, I gave you some examples, yoga. Our therapists and athletic trainers know that isometric is very important in early rehab, just innervating the muscle, just getting it going, just doing quad sets, like tighten, like tighten, innervating above resting tone. Okay. So the key thing though is that even though that muscle is not changing length, it's still trying to change. Like it's still trying to shorten, even though it doesn't. But it's doing a job above rest. If I hold this position, these muscles up here are doing a job, because if I turn them off, my arm would plop down. My arm here, I have muscles that are doing a job, because if they didn't, turn off, plop down. Okay. Concentric work. Everything is the same. Muscles being innervated above resting tone, trying to shorten. The only difference is that they actually shorten. They are doing what they are trying to do. The ultimate victory of a muscle, I guess you could look at it. Doing what they're trying to do. Shortening while trying to shorten above resting tone. Notice I said that in 3 phases. Isometric, no shortening, no movement while trying to shorten above resting tone. Concentric work or concentric contraction, shortening while trying to shorten above resting tone. Pulling in a certain direction of motion, and you actually cause motion in the direction of your pull above resting tone. So in the case of me holding my arm out like this, well, what got my arm up out there? Got to get it up there. So I'm going to shorten while trying to shorten above resting tone. I'm going to use these muscles that pull this way to get me up here. And then I'm going to use those same muscles to keep me up here. The muscles were the same. The work or the contraction type was different in terms of what actually got me up and then what held me up. Same muscles, same concepts of pull, but different outcomes of actually creating motion and then preventing motion. Why is an elevator called an elevator? I'm not going to jump down your throat. This is fun. Why is an elevator called an elevator? Who wants to talk? It's elevated. Okay, awesome. So it brings you up. How do you get back down? The elevator? All right. It's fun. It's fun to think of these things, right? We call it an elevator because it brings you up, but do we call it a depressor when it brings you down? No, we still call it an elevator, right? And the reason we still call it an elevator is that the cable that makes you go up keeps you from falling down and lets you go down at a nice, easy, comfortable speed always pulls. Yeah. It always pulls in the direction of elevation. Even when it's lowering you down, it's still working by pulling up. We don't have cables that pull down. Boy, wouldn't that be exciting? Going down? Yay! Sling you down, right? We don't do that. We don't need downward cables. All we need is an upward cable. Now, I say unfortunately, it's actually pretty cool. For us, if we live in slow world, I'm doing the Joker dance here. Gosh, this week it was so cool. We have to have downward pulling cables. You know why? Because we live in the mosquito capital of the world. And if my arms work like elevators, made me go up, kept me up, I'm going to get you, mosquito. For us, we have to pull with downward cables, right? When we're running as fast as we can, we have to pull with downward cables that are pulling in the same direction as gravity to go faster than what gravity can offer. But an elevator is not in one of those situations. Right? What do we call this exercise? Just fun with semantics. I put ankle cuffs or I sit in the machine and I do this. What's a common term for this exercise? Leg extensions. Awesome. Let me do a literal interpretation of that exercise. Legs extend. Yay! Oh no, what do I do now? What's this called?
Function.
You flex half the time, but you call it a leg extension machine, right? I'm just saying, right? We have to remember, we have to just kind of think of these things to help us in understanding the concept that I think most people think it's easy, and it can be easy if we understand what's really happening. It can be super easy if we understand what's really happening. An elevator is called an elevator not because it brings you up, it lowers you down half the time. It's called an elevator because the cable that influences its motion always pulls in the direction of elevation. When it's preventing you from falling down, it's pulling up. When it's lowering you down, it's pulling up. So let's bring that analogy to a common muscle in the body that everybody knows. Okay, let's talk about bicep. Bicep is a superficial muscle, and I mean that literally. There's a muscle that lives underneath him called the brachialis, who's even more important than him, but he lives on the outside so everybody gets to see him. Yay. So let's pretend that bicep is pulling in the same direction as an elevator cable. Now, I can repossess, that's why engineers hate biomechanics. It's like, no, the elevator needs to stay put. And I'm like, nah, man, I can move my elevator all over the place. But let's just, for this example, pretend that they're pulling in the same direction, up. I'm on the first floor. This is the floor of the elevator. Pretend. Pretend. First floor. I don't know if this is going to work. Legs. Horrible analogy, just go with it. First floor. I need to go up to the 6th floor. Elevator makes me go up. Shortening while trying to shorten. That's what type of work? Concentric work. It's doing a job. I gotta get up. I gotta go up. Elevator cable that pulls up, in this case, the bicep says, I got your back. I'm gonna make you come up. Now, what if I wanna hold it here for a few seconds? I don't know, maybe I'm Instagramming or something. For the elevator analogy, you have to stay put. Doors gotta open, people gotta get off, people gotta come in. You know, it's not like, you know, you get out of a moving car and tuck and roll, Grandma, get out of here, I'm in a hurry. There has to be still, 0 is a number, guys. No movement is a type of movement. If I hold it up here, the same cable that's pulling in the same direction is still doing a job. It's just not the same job. It's a different job. It's not making me go up anymore. It's keeping me up. It's keeping me here, preventing gravity from making me fall down. So what I want you to understand is everything's the same except the job is different. Now it's not making me come up, it's keeping me up. And that's the difference between this and that. This made me move, and this prevented me from moving. But it was still doing a job. So my point is that just because, we do not assume in this class, just because I'm laying down at rest and you don't see movement, does not mean I have isometric work. Isometrics is when the muscle is working above rest. I'm at rest right there. I do that all day. Isometrics is when the muscle is being called to do a job above rest, preventing motion. Now, this is the one that most people have a tough time with, and I get it. Made me go up, kept me up, let me go down. Now, here's the trick. This cable pulling up, remember, muscles can only, that is correct, pull. This muscle can't push me down, nor should it want to. You already have gravity that wants to make me fall down. And if gravity alone made me fall down 6 stories, bad things, man. The last thing I want is something else to make me go even faster than what gravity can offer. So here's the trick. Tug-of-war analogy with my son. I beat my son, I tie my son, and then I let my son win. I let off. I let gravity be greater than me. I control who's greater. Gravity is going to have the mass of the earth. The only time we gain mass is when meteors hit us. It's the same force. What the variability is the muscle. I can choose to be greater, I can choose to tie, or I can choose to be less. It's still pulling up, even though it's letting the motion go down. But at the end of the day, now we're going to go down the rabbit hole even further. Who was really responsible for that extension? I know that I can let my son win, but if he's not pulling in that direction, the rope don't move. See what I'm getting to? So the way you have to look at it is, even though it's me that allowed him to be greater, he's still greater. He provided the motion, the force to allow the motion, or to make the motion go. You are letting gravity be greater, but if God turned off gravity, your arm wouldn't go anywhere. Even if your muscle let off, if you didn't have that secondary force that wants to extend you, you would not extend. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? That's an example of how eccentric work, it's being lengthened. The muscle doesn't lengthen itself. The muscle allows itself to be lengthened. It's a new yoga pose. Guys, rubber bands can't lengthen themselves. TheraBands can't lengthen themselves. Muscles cannot lengthen themselves. Think of it with the ruptured bicep. I saw firsthand, a friend of mine in college, I was in the athletic training room, and he came into the training room, and it looked like a supernova went off in his arm. Ruptured bicep. It was like a curtain. It was like a ball, because there was nothing else to pull on. It just came up. So I ask you, could that bicep say, oh no, let me go back down? In other words, the muscle can't lengthen itself. The doctor had to take it and lengthen it and reattach it. Muscles can be lengthened. They can shorten themselves, but they cannot lengthen themselves. Here's one more analogy. So why not? Beat that dead horse. Imagine if someone in class was on roller skates. Y'all know what roller skates are? I don't know if they still have roller rinks. Okay? They're on wheels. And I have a rope. And that rope represents a muscle. They have similarities. They pull. They have the potential. Person on roller skates looking at me, I'm looking at them. I pull on them and cause motion in the direction of my pull. Shortening while trying to shorten. When she starts coming to me, wouldn't that be a representation of concentric work? Now here's what I'm trying to say. Once she starts coming to me, what else could I do with that muscle, with that rope? I can't push her to a stop. Once she starts coming to me, I can't, that pull on that rope can't make her go back, is what I'm trying to say. If that rope is to lengthen again, something has to lengthen. Maybe someone has a rope on the other end, and I bring her to me, and then that rope slows her down this way and speeds her up the other way. Well, now my rope is lengthening again. That rope can't lengthen itself. Now, here's what a rope can do. If she has motion away from me, right? Let's say she was skating backwards, and I start to tug on the rope. I can slow down her motion away from me through eccentrics. Continue to pull to speed up motion towards me, concentrics. But again, that's the only two things I can do back to back. And that's why we have the term plyometrics. Plyometrics is slowing down motion one way from a muscle's pull, immediately followed by speeding up motion the other way. And then that's it. That's the only thing a muscle can do back to back in terms of influencing acceleration, speeding up and slowing down. In your book, I have definitions. I find it wise to learn those definitions and learn them as I infer you to learn them. No change in motion while trying to shorten above resting tone. Shortening while trying to shorten above resting tone. Being lengthened while trying to shorten above resting tone. Questions? Yes, sir.
So you gave the example of doing a bicep curl. Do the rolls switch whenever you're doing like a tricep extension of the concentric and eccentric contractions?
The roles never switch because the concepts are the concepts are the same. Let me try to delve into your questions so that way I make sure we're on the same page. Tricep extension. Again, that's like leg extension, right? We're going to be flexing half the time. So inherently there are misunderstandings in what we call certain things. But the concepts are still the same. Let's pretend I'm inferring that you want to do it where like maybe there's a cable pulling up, okay? Well, when I was doing the bicep curl, gravity wanted to extend my elbow, right? Just like in the elevator, gravity wants to drop the elevator. So I need to use cables that pull in the opposite direction. Well, when I have a cable and I'm pushing down, that's because the cable is trying to flex. Gravity is still pulling down, but it's pulling down on the weight stack. Pulleys are redirecting that force, so it's trying to flex me. So the concept is still the same. An external force is trying to do something to me. So I need to make a phone call with some muscles that pull in the opposite direction. So in the case of the elbow extensor exercise that you present, I need muscles that are pulling my forearm down because an external force is trying to make my hand go up. So if the cable is trying to make my elbow flex, I need to call my extensors to make me extend through concentric work, keep me from flexing through isometric work, or let me flex through, there's only one left, brother. Yes! Eccentric work. It's your question. It's the same thing. And if you say, does the same concepts apply to hamstring curls? Yes! Does the same concept apply to lateral raises? Yes! Does the same concept apply through wrist? Yes! Because muscles can only pull. And when you can only pull, every muscle in the body follows the same rules. So to answer your question, yes. It's a good question. Thank you for asking. Any other questions? All right, guys, sign the roll. Y'all have a good day.